Welcome to the Crimson Engine. My name is Rubidium. Today we are talking about story and the 5 mistakes that people make that sabotage their storytelling when it comes to especially first-time filmmakers, but also authors, comic book artists, whatever it is. Whenever you're trying to tell a story, these are the traps that most people fall into most of the time because they don't understand how good stories work. So kicking off at number 1, and you'll hear this in every story class, every, creative writing 101, is most stories don't have enough conflict. People fall in love with their heroes, they're protective of them, and they want them to be blessed going through this imaginary world, sort of getting every opportunity, landing on their feet, having things work out for them. And they like to set up the world or set up the story for too long before something happens where there's tension, where there's something interesting, where there's something at doubt. Conflict is the engine of storytelling because it creates chaos, it creates unpredictability. When 2 people or 2 forces are fighting over something, we don't know, as the reader or the audience, which one is going to win. So we stick around to find out because we think, can a, guy with superpowers defeat a black hole? We don't know because it's an imaginary world. Or, can the good guys who are outnumbered beat the bad guys? We want to see both if they can, and if they do, how they do it. So without conflict, without some kind of obstacle, the story doesn't become interesting. The hero can't kind of dig into their core, can't go past their surface, their personality, and get into their actual character. Character is what is revealed when things go wrong, when things are hard. Everyone is honest when it's to their advantage, but when they are set to lose something that they care about, can they still tell the truth? That is true honesty. So conflict is sort of the juice. Conflict is the thing that brings out the real interesting parts of the story. And without conflict, without insurmountable conflict, that we think as the audience, we don't know how this hero is going to get out of trouble. The story doesn't really get interesting. This is one of the problems with the character of Superman. They gave him every power, and so it is very difficult to put him into a situation where we can't see how he could get out of it, right? He has infinite strength. He's invulnerable. He's super fast. He's, that for 50 years, people have been trying to think up new ways that Superman can have a problem. And Superman is usually the first superhero that kids discover, and the first one they leave for other people like Batman, who has no powers and just has to think his way out of everything. So conflict is essential, and not enough conflict early enough can kill a story really, really quickly. The second tip, which is related to the first, is internal conflict. A hero that is just always does the right thing in the right way, always just sets off on their path and follows it unwaveringly, unceasingly, isn't interesting to us because we want to know, not just on the outside, is the hero going to fail physically? We want to know, will the hero fail internally, psychologically, emotionally? We want temptation. We want the person, even if you're writing a novel, you can always say, the hero thought this, then he thought this, and he was unsure, he was uncertain. But when you're a filmmaker, you have to show that. You have to show the person being sidetracked. You have to be distracted. You have to see them doubting themselves. it has the same effect as the conflict. Like once you overcome those, you're more of a hero. And two, it puts everything in doubt and makes us identify with the hero more, because we all have doubts, we all have uncertainties. Not just, are we up for the challenge, but is this really the challenge that we want? If it's going to be this hard, is overcoming the villain really worthwhile if another one's going to take their place? This kind of doubts make the character real. The third problem that we see a lot is that the plot just sort of carries the hero along. The choices that they're presented with are so obvious and so rudimentary and elementary that we don't really get the sense that the hero is doing anything. If you have to pick between door 1, 2, and 3, and door 1 clearly leads where you're going, you're just going to pick door 1 every time. We don't feel that the character is being tested. There are plenty of movies where the character, the hero, is sort of like Mr. Magoo, which, if you don't remember the TV show, he's this nearsighted old man who just tries to walk to work and gets into these crazy situations totally unknowns to them, as he's sort of picked up by construction cranes and placed in different places. But to him, with his near eyesight, he's just walking on his way to work. It's thus the audience that get anxious for him as he's in this unseen danger. But a lot of plots are like that, where the character is just doing the most obvious thing again and again and again, and we don't feel like there's any uncertainty or doubt, or the character isn't doing the very human thing of making difficult choices, because all the choices are so obvious. So those first 3 items covered both plot and character. Now we're going to get into the world that your story takes place in. And the 2 big problems with this, the first one is that the world feels shallow. This is especially problematic in fantasy and science fiction, where you, the author, have thought up this world, and now you're dropping us into it as the audience, and it often feels like it's not very well thought out, that the rules of this world happen for the convenience of the plot, which of course they do, but as a reader and as an audience, that can feel like it's shallow, like it's paper thin. Real worlds have contradictions, difficulties, black markets. Like, think of the political system in your country. It isn't just cut and dried. There isn't a certain set of rules that everyone follows. There are of course rules, there are laws. Some of them are contradictory. There's the government. In the government, there's 2 or 3 or 4 different forces at work that are working together some of the time and against one another other parts of the time. People are pushing for power, but not so hard usually that their system itself is being compromised. The world is a messy, convoluted, complicated place. And unless your world has elements of that, it's going to feel paper thin. It's going to feel shallow. This rule is certainly adjusted for the age of the reader or the audience. Like, if you look at the world, the rules of Kung Fu Panda, say, it is a lot simpler than the world of Game of Thrones or Warhammer 40k. These are complex, deep mythologies, or Lord of the Rings is a perfect example. These are complicated worlds that were made up over decades for a mature audience, and people love to get lost in them. Whereas the world of Kung Fu Panda, it's for kids. It's lots of things of convenience. It gets made up as they go, and no one really thinks too much into it. It doesn't mean that you have to find the entire world of Lord of the Rings before you write your first book or write your first screenplay, but you need to allude to the sort of complications and depth that it might go on to have before you just throw together a science fiction or a fantasy environment and put your characters into it. One of the successes of the original Godfather novel that then was translated into the Godfather film is that it revealed this complex and fascinating underworld within contemporary 1950s society that was, the mafia. It was one of the first books that kind of uncovered the different rules and rituals and relationships between these organized crime figures that up until that point, the general public had just assumed that they were sort of like street thugs and that they had no organization whatsoever. The Godfather kind of pulled back the curtain and let us see these rituals, and probably more than actually existed in real life, but created this world of the mafia that then, countless movies had been set within. Mario Puzo knew this world really well because he wrote The Godfather to try and pay back a gambling debt that he owed to the mafia before they could break his thumbs. The fifth big problem with new screenplays, new books, is that the world gives us too much too fast. I can't tell you how many science fiction novels I've abandoned on like page 10 because there was just so much jargon, so much unfamiliar things. The Zaphod and the Zippity went to Zondo 7, and you're like, what is this? It gives us so much that we can't follow the plot, we can't follow the characters. If we can't follow the characters, we can't make sense of their choices, and we don't identify with them. We're not intrigued, we're not engaged, we're not part of the story. So what a tried and true method is to have our main character taken into this sort of secret world, and they ask the questions that we're asking. This is what happens in the first Harry Potter. Right, Harry discovers the world of magic. He has all the questions that we would have. He's sort of brought in and initiated into the fraternity of Hogwarts and how it works and what you can and can't do, and sort of has our same reaction. So we're brought in with him. The same is sort of true of The Hobbit. Bilbo lives this very isolated existence in the Shire. Then he goes on this adventure, and along the way he learns all the things about dragons, about dwarves that he didn't really know. And we also have J.R.R. Tolkien's narrator kind of giving us play-by-play like factoids and sort of writing it down as though he were a real historian in the world of Middle-earth, but in a later period. John Carter does this in the science fiction genre, where he goes to sleep in a cave and wakes up on Mars, and there are all these strange creatures and he has these strange abilities, but he finds out about them as we do. To take a reader and drop them in the middle of a very unfamiliar world is a difficult, advanced thing to do as a writer, and it's much easier in the visual medium, like in Aliens or something, because we can see it all, we can take it in. But when you're actually putting words on the page, it is a much more difficult task. So you need to create devices that allow your reader to familiarize himself with the rules of this world, with how things work. I think Star Wars did this really well by having a science fiction setting, but having a lot of the Jedi be, Middle Ages sword fighting tropes, where you have the wizard and the sword from your father, and you have the Force, which is obviously some kind of like magic, and it combined those two things and then put Luke Skywalker in there to slowly discover both what the Empire was and what the Force was, who the Jedi and the Sith were. He made the science fiction feel like fantasy and kind of captured both markets. So if you are writing a story and struggling to get something that feels good, then those are 5 things that you can work on. My new course, The DNA of Story, covers a lot of these things and more. It dives into the essentials of story, what you have to get right to make your story work. You can check it out at storydna.org. Thank you to everyone who's checked it out and taken the course. It was a huge week for the launch. I really appreciate all the nice comments that I've been getting. I'm really glad that people out there are responding to this work. And I really do think that this is what has been missing in filmmaking for a really long time, an understanding of how to capture an audience and say something real. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.